Hello and welcome to this, the 169th episode of Old Romans Unscripted. And greetings to our viewers everywhere, wherever you are. Please don't be shy. Please post in the comments as usual and let us know where it is you're viewing from. Greetings to you, Peggy, there in East Tennessee. And hopefully our other regular viewers are watching too. Let us know. Just say hi and let us know. Oh, yes, here we go. That's Barbara, who normally would be over the way from here, but is in Cornwall. Greetings to you, Barb, and to Stephen. Greetings to you from Warwickshire here in the UK. Greetings to you, Royler, MO in Jefferson City Diocese. Greetings to you all. And greetings to my colleague, Father Thomas Gerke. How are you?
Yes,
Well,
doing well.
Question.
I'm alive.
Father suffering with a migraine, so bear with. And anytime doesn't need word. It shouldn't need worth saying, but obviously if it gets too much, Father, just bow out. That's fine. And Bishop Nicholas may or may not be joining us. Bishop Kelly, we may see him, we may not. But let's move on to today's theme. So today's title is Sanctum Bellum, which translated, of course, from the Latin into English means holy war. And we are, well, wonderful greetings to Anne in Ireland, faithful and ever stalwart supporter, bless you. Holy war. In the last 2 weeks, since last we broadcast, even more stuff has gone on and hit the headlines for the Catholic Church, not least of which, greetings to you, Mary. Say hi, Mum, Father Thomas.
Hi,
Mum. Not least of which has been the announcement of yet another conclave and new cardinals. This will be the 9th conclave that Pope Francis has had, and even more cardinals are being appointed, and incredibly, if memory serves, I think the total now of cardinals for the Holy Roman Church at the end of this conclave will stand at 234.
Right around there, ballpark. Yeah. But how many are actually able to vote? Is it still
9? So yeah. Pope Paul VI set the limit at 120. Of those 139 that will exist, many of them will retire later this year, and another almost 10 will retire next year. By retire, I mean they will reach the age of 80 and then will be ineligible to vote in a papal conclave. But greetings to you, Shirley, over there in Saltdean here in the UK. So of the, I think it's 139 cardinal electors at the end of this September, over 100, I think as many as 109, will have been appointed by Pope Francis.
It's an overwhelming majority for sure.
Overwhelming majority. I mean, it's like 3/4 more or more. So I can see Bishop Kelly is with us, so I'm just going to bring him on. Greetings to you, Bishop Kelly.
Hello. How is everyone?
Oh, you're very faint.
How is everyone?
I can't hear you at all.
Can't hear you. Let me.
Any better?
Not really. Let me see if I can do anything this end. Speak.
I will speak.
Oh no. Are you on the? You're not on the phone then.
I am. I can try to switch.
Oh.
Let me see. All right. Let me get back to you.
Okay. Bless him. So Bishop Kelly's going to sort out his mic and sound. Okay, so where were we? Yes. So that means, of course, that at the next papal election, assuming there will be one, that Pope Francis will have appointed over 3/4 of the electors. And of course, what we know about Pope Francis is that he's not against promoting his own, which is to say that unlike previous popes who have, it might be said, sought to be impartial or at least balanced or fair in their selection and appointment of cardinals, so that Pope Benedict and indeed John Paul II and Paul VI and the others before them didn't necessarily appoint along party lines. So they didn't always appoint, or they didn't only appoint those who agreed with them. They didn't only select those who thought in the same way that they did, or had the same interests or ideas for the church, which is how people like Pope Francis even became selected himself as a cardinal. And others, likewise, Cardinal Marini, for example, and others before, who were clearly not on the same page as John Paul or Benedict. Whereas Francis has very much selected only his own men. We see this not just in his selection of cardinals, but in his appointments to office, as we referred last time to the appointment of the new prefect for the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, Archbishop Tucha Fernandez, who ghostwrote Moris Laetitia, a clear ally and favorite of Pope Francis. And there are, a dozen other appointments one could make reference to. What are your thoughts about this new conclave of cardinals?
I mean, it's not surprising because, obviously we pointed out Jorge Bergoglio has an agenda and he's executing said agenda, and it has nothing to do with the norms of Catholicism or any aspect that is of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. He's more focused on the structure and the ape of said church and that agenda. And I mean, all this does is just show that we were justified. Old Romans, Society of St. Pius X, Society of St. Pius, or Pius V, any other traditional groups out there that are in an irregular canonical situation, because we saw the writing on the wall and we said that we can't in good faith be part of this. This is not what Christ has intended for his church to be. But nonetheless, here we are. So it's not surprising, to say the least. The only thing that I am kind of surprised about is that there is not more uproar amongst the conservative or middle of the road prelates. Everybody seems to still be holding the party line, or just not wanting to ruffle feathers, and that's concerning in a sense. That's where I'm more concerned about, because you would think, with all the education that these prelates have, the seminaries and the other schools that they have attended, and you look at their walls and you see all the prominent degrees they have. You think they'd be able to put the brain cells together right now and see that something's rotten in Denmark. But that's what I'm more surprised about, is that there's not more clergy or prelates speaking against or speaking up to this. They're just still letting it happen.
Yeah, I think there is various different ways of appreciating that situation. I mean, it may be that they're waiting on this synod to voice their opinions there. That could be the case, that they've thought, okay, well, a synod is a perfect opportunity to express one's views. It's perhaps safer to do so within the context of a synod, where it's expected to have discussion. So it could be that at the synod, more conservative voices will express themselves and be heard. That's one perspective. The other, of course, is that so captured is the hierarchy of the church that there aren't enough, not just enough conservative voices, potentially, but even conservative bishops, that actually they've all succumbed to the contemporary mindset. They might have reservations about some things, but they won't say anything. And in other words, that they just aren't convicted enough as Catholic bishops to say anything. Then, of course, there may be those who want all these changes to happen. We know that the majority of bishops in Germany, for example, seem to be pro, as do those in Belgium and Holland. Although the same could have been said of those regions for the last 200 or 300 years. Germany especially, and Holland noticeably at the beginning of the last century. A lot of the new liturgical movement, as it was called, came from the Low Countries. The experimentations, the early experimentations with the liturgy, came from those places. And yeah, so there's I do wonder if some bishops are waiting for the synod. But of course, the other thing to note is that not all bishops will be participating in the synod. And again, Francis has selected the bishops who will attend. Excellency, what's your thinking on this?
Pretty much, I think, from what I've heard, you've summed it up. I mean, is it a foregone conclusion? Is it just a sham going through the motions? I hope you can hear me, by the way.
Yeah, we can perfectly.
Yeah, because I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay.
You're quite right. I mean, the dangerous countries seem to be well represented. I mean, I don't think there'll be any shocks. Well, if they maintain the traditional line and the perennial teaching and practice of the church, then yeah, that'll be a shock. But I think we can see it coming. You know, we've been presented with the horizon for quite some time now, and we'll just see it getting closer. Yeah, I nothing much more to say than what you've said and summed up on it. I think the fix is in. You know, they may play the long game, which would be a very Roman thing to do. So little by little, plant a few little devices there that will explode later down the line. We shall see.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, the whole thing does slightly reek of desperation.
Yeah. Oh, yes, for sure.
You know, as many commentators have said, you know, Bergoglio may not last. He may not be here till for next year when the second session is planned. And you know, this sudden increase of cardinal electors, these sudden appointments of cronies, the agenda that's been adopted for the synod, and I think I'm not sure. I get the feeling that in many ways this is the last shout of that generation that created the spirit of Vatican II phenomenon.
They came in kicking and screaming, and they're going to leave kicking and screaming.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as anyone reasonably knows, there's nothing about the new liturgy or the new progressive theologies that really is justified by the Second Vatican Council. You know, there's, you know, we've discussed it before. I know, you know, the Vatican Council itself, okay, wasn't brilliant, but actually there is a conservative way of interpreting the conciliar documents. There is a way of reconciling most of them with perennial tradition and the magisterium. There are a couple of dodgy things like Nostra Aetate and things like that, but you know, overall, you know, 94% of what the council came up with is bearable, or is appreciable from a conservative perspective. But as we know, you know, the lie has been that the Novus Ordo Mass is the liturgy of the council, that all these progressive theologies, approaches, and attitudes are from the council. That's all nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. You know, all this stuff, this spirit of Vatican II stuff, is clearly from the 70s, from the late 60s. It's after the council, and the Conciliar Fathers would never have gone along with what is constantly claimed to have derived from them. And, you know, I say a last shout or a desperation. because, as Bergoglio himself has said, he believes that he was mandated at the last papal conclave to finally affect the changes that followed the council. So there's been this, constant suggestion that Benedict and John Paul both frustrated the implementation of the council. I think it's true that both sought to mollify the effects of the council, but they weren't beyond them. They weren't entirely themselves, I would say, against the council. One of the noticeable things about any encyclical of John Paul II's is its constant references to Vatican II documents. And Benedict wasn't much different. Francis, of course, noticeably in his encyclicals, constantly refers to himself, refers to his own encyclicals, with glib references to the council. But in the history of the church, in the history of papal encyclicals, it's very interesting that, previous popes would refer and cite documents from any or all of the previous councils and papal literature. But noticeably, since Paul VI, nobody quotes anything but the Second Vatican Council.
It is interesting, though, because I've noticed a lot of Catholic commentaries are actually exhausted with Vatican II Council now, and are actually picking away at Vatican I. So that is something to be bring up for a conversation. I think is that people are finally realizing that it's not just all Vatican II. There are concerns with Vatican I, and I think there is some good to be had from this craziness that we're in. Is that you're seeing that what this current Pope is doing is actually the root problems that were addressed and concerned with Vatican I, and why there was hesitation with some of the documents in Vatican I, and there was some dubia or caution. So it is quite interesting that I think Vatican I and Vatican II are actually kind of making a complete, if you will, concern, or you see this package deal of modernism in this one Pope. He's kind of just bringing everything to light.
Bishop Kelly?
Yeah, I think we've discussed before that, the Second Vatican Council just didn't pop out of nowhere. Seeds had been laid all along. Of course, Vatican I is on the eve of the 20th century, where the Vatican Council, coming at the end of the century and middle to the end of the century, is a product of that century. The Pian reforms of Pius X, the Breviary, the advent of contraception, the acceptance of that with Protestant churches. There's been an chipping away of traditional Catholic Christian belief and practice that goes back at least 100 years before the Second Vatican Council, and if not rooted squarely in the Enlightenment as a product of the so-called Reformation. So yes, it has been in the making. I hope you're right that we are now in the death throes of it. We're certainly in the death throes of that, given the longevity or the natural lifespan of a human being. We're in the death throes of that generation of people who were involved with the council, who were around for it. But they do have followers. They have been able to to sell it to some, not all. And, you know, as Weiser has said, it's extremely hard to pass on a revolution, meaning that you have to be there for the revolution. You have to be there. You have to be impassioned and bold and have taken part in the revolution. It's very hard to pass that passion on. You can pass on the ideals and the system that was installed, of course, but you cannot pass on the passion, the involvement, the sacrifice of oneself to the ideals of that revolution. But you do. I mean, you've got James Martin. I mean, you know, you list the normal ones, but then you get, and they're the loudmouths. There, I'm not so much worried about them because they speak so much that you know, they have enough rope to hang themselves. It's what concerns me more is the mediocre parish priests, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, most of us are mediocre. We all are, apart from a few Mozarts and Aquinas and geniuses. But you know, the people at the coalface who are just regurgitating what they've been taught in the seminaries. You know, I stepped into a church not so long ago on a Sunday, and the sermon was going on. It was the Sunday after Corpus Christi, which is their Corpus Christi. You know, and I wasn't shocked. I would have been shocked and enraged a number of years ago, but of course it was there. It was the congregation that affects the Eucharist. The priest is the conduit, but it cannot happen without the congregation present. You know, the usual bashing of tradition is the priest walking up and down the middle aisle with a Britney Spears head microphone, pointing out the side altars and saying, you know, laughing and scoffing at how crazy it was, where you would have half a dozen to a dozen priests all saying mass at once at these altars. And, you know, is it without congregations? Were they even masses when the main mass was going on? Well, the usual nonsense that you hear. That's what's more worrying. If that takes grain, if that gets ingrained and takes hold for generations to come, that's the insidious thing. That's the danger. You know, the people in the media, the loudmouths, can be argued against in their own forum that they've created. And they can, you know, they've made themselves public, so therefore they can be, you know, discoursed with and brought down in public through logical argument and appealing to tradition of the church, the fathers and the previous councils. But it's what happened in the parish. It's how people are being formed, and I don't blame that. I don't even blame the priests. This is what they were taught in seminary, and they're just passing on. They have 1,000 things to do between leaky roofs, dwindling congregations, consolidating parishes, saying masses, and they have a lot of things on their plate, and they just regurgitate what they've been told in seminary. But it does affect the laity. It does affect those that still show up, because they trust Father to be handing on to them that which has always been handed on. So that's my worry for the future, not the soundings, clashing cymbals and gongs of the likes that we're all too familiar with.
Well, and very much said. You know, it's as you're making all good points. You know, I'm kind of reminded that it's like you see what's real and true, and often in revolutions, you know, you can't pass on a revolution, but yet you see within the traditional liturgy, you see the traditional practice of the faith, how that's being passed on, not as a revolution, but as something that is sacred and true and real. And you see the faithful flocking to it. You see, you know, the conviction of young people, and myself included, you know, that just have this zeal for tradition and love the liturgy and love learning Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventure and Augustine and want to know everything about the faith. They don't want to settle for this watered down modernistic version of Catholicism, where you see these leaders within the modern church. They're in an echo chamber. They think what they're doing is great. They all tell each other we're doing such a great job. It doesn't matter that we've lost 100 churches and that we've lost, millions of faithful to anything. That doesn't matter. We're in an echo chamber, and they don't care anymore about the future. They only care about themselves in the present. And you can see that.
Well, I mean, yes, for some of them. Others, that would be too smart. And I think, again, you reinforce the point. Even though the traditional chapels are packed, it's still a very small portion. They appear larger because there are fewer of them. And they are attracting young people, those whose eyes are open and who are open to it. Most people go along to get along, and it becomes a routine. Now, I hope and pray that they would have more zeal in the practice of their faith. And I give thanks for the very fact that they are engaging with the faith in some sort of level. But it's those people we need to reach. That's where the crusade needs to go to. We need to enliven those people and open their eyes so that they do ask questions. And you mentioned Aquinas and Bonaventure and Augustine and people like that in the traditional liturgy. Well, of course it's popular because it was never a revolution. It's what always, and it's passed on and accepted. It's like your own family lineage. Your where you came from, what your grandfather did, your great grandfather, the area, if we do know what they achieved, and the very fact that you're still here and you carry on a family name and all of that. There's no revolution in that. It's a patrimony. It's something that has been passed on to you, that you're proud of, that you accept, and something you find value in, that you want to pass on to the next generation. It's not a revolution. It's not a rupture. It's not a new beginning. I don't know how many sermons I've sat through that have either said or taken for granted or alluded to the fact that the church began anew with the Second Vatican Council. And it didn't. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a mammoth task, but the very fact that we are here 2,000 years later still talking about the task shows that it does have longevity. The zeal of Catholics and Christians can be reignited, and it has been in the past. Certainly under persecution or the rise of heresy and stuff has reawakened people, stirred the heart to fight for their inheritance, to carry on that theme of being passed along. It is an inheritance. It is something that belongs to us and something that's precious that must be maintained. I mean, if you have a family heirloom, I can't think of an example, say it's a silver tea set that goes back to the 1700s and has been passed down. You don't break off a handle and give it to the next generation. You pass it on intact. And it comes with the story and with the tradition, and in a way it links you back. That's, the Holy Father can stack the synod any way he wants and bring in whoever he wants. And but you will only get a synopsis of what a certain portion of the church believes at a particular time. It is not a wider belief, it's not a wider portion, and it does not stretch back to Christ and before. And
this is
so.
That's fundamentally what we see. Is the problem with this whole Spirit of Vatican II approach, because it doesn't go any further back than 1969, and it's very much of the time and the generation that it was born in.
Look at the art and the music, and I mean, it's It hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's
And already that generation, is going. They're passing away. And I remember one of the earliest videos produced by the SSPX was called Priests for Tomorrow, and was a series of interviews with Archbishop Lefebvre at Icone, talking about the crisis in the church and the necessity for the seminary, etc. And in it, he says that a priest, there were two things that he said that have always stuck with me. That a priest at the turn of the previous century said that to truly be a son of the church, one must not only be prepared to die for her, but by her hands also. And then and another phrase he used, which people are very familiar with, but he says, the church who marries the present generation will be the widow in the next. And that's what we're seeing now. The church, the contemporary church, is already effectively being a widow. That's why she's empty. That's why the new liturgies, etc., don't bring people, they don't touch people, they don't encourage people to stay. All the progressive ideas and theology, etc., doesn't touch people. It doesn't appeal to people. And now we're seeing this widow in desperation, still refusing to recognize, and acknowledge, and then deal with the fact that she has nothing to say to the present generation. And that, of course, is in stark contrast to the Church of the Ages, which and to Catholic tradition, which, of course, still speaks to the contemporary age, but does so with the wealth and experience of 2,000 years. The tradition is not, as some people are wont to think, or some people are wont to suggest, tradition is not, the 1950s. The tradition spans the whole previous 2,000 years of the church's lived experience, and within that lived experience is the witness and testimony of every age that it went through, and the organic and cultural developments that denote those passing phases, so that the church now should be, should reflect all of that experience, and up until the 50s and 60s, she did. And what we have now, people could say it's a counterfeit church, or people refer to it as the new church. The question is Holy Church at the moment wearing a mask of the present passing, fading generation? And underneath, is she still there, the Church of the Ages? Or has the Church of the Ages been effectively eclipsed and superseded and even erased by the new?
Well,
I think that's
it's
a very interesting, a very, very interesting question, and I don't have an answer, and I've gone back and forth on it. I'm intrigued by the position that Bishop Williamson seems to take, which would lean towards the first of your propositions, that it's still in there somewhere. And when he talks about the Eucharistic miracles that happen even with the Novus Ordo, that Christ is still active in the church, as messy as it is, as confused as it is, in people's lives, in the life of communities. When you see these miracles, Eucharistic and otherwise, you see conversions, you see, despite persecution, the emergence of these religious congregations that, which would lead you to believe that Christ is still with the church, is still active in the church, and hopefully that will, like a seed beneath the ground, begin to germinate and re-emerge at some point. Or has it collapsed? Has it ceased to exist? Has it lost? Has it lost God? Is God no longer with it? Has it served its purpose? That's a little too pessimistic even for me. So I like to think, and I said I don't know, and I haven't even reached an opinion, but I like to think, as Bishop Williamson does, that there is some sort of activity there, that Christ is still with us. And remember, it's we who abandon Christ. Christ doesn't abandon us. I mean, you look at the Garden of Gethsemane, Garden of Olives, where could you not spend 1 hour with me? The apostles abandoned him. He did not abandon them. So I like to think that Christ is still with the church. Like everything we tend to touch, us human beings, we create a mess. But who knows? Who knows?
Well, Our Lady knows, and she said it very clear. We will have the ape of the church. There will be a time of great persecution, and Our Lady is.
But there's always been plenty of times of great persecution.
But she is more so said for these times. She has specifically said, and given time frames of the current generation that we are in. She has made that known. Our Lady of Akita.
She's made what known? Sorry, that there'll be a persecution
for these times. Like there will be an ape of the church. Bishop.
The end of the church. Sorry, I'm confused to what you're saying. Will there be a persecution?
The ape of the church, bishop against bishop.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. Well,
I mean, and Our Lady, she has warned us at Fatima. She has given us countless times.
Yeah, but there's nothing new in that. Didn't Nicholas slap Arius across the face at Nicaea? Yeah,
but here's the thing: we have to be realistic. And Our Lady appears in certain times for certain reasons. She has given us warnings in certain times and certain reasons. Can you hear me? Okay.
I'm struggling, but yeah, go
on. And that's what we need to be ever mindful of, is that, I will take a more pessimistic route, because we need to be awoken to the dire situation that we're in.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I hope there's something in there still. Yes, there's no apathy. There's no time for apathy. We have to stand up. We have to try to rescue. We have to enliven people. We have to get to the parishes, to the people. We have to invigorate, like I said earlier, we need to stir up that passion again and do away with the apathy. We need to fight the good fight. I'm not denying any of that. I'm just saying that I hope, and I don't think that the church has been abandoned by God.
Hold on, Father Tom. We can't hear you at all. Can't hear you. Oh, maybe the batteries have gone on these earphone things. Yeah, because it's
I mean, what he says is right, but I don't think I was arguing against that.
No. I think it was just simply, pointing out that that what we did, what we, one of the things that's often referred to is this ape of the church, and obviously that's something that Our Lady herself has said in visions, but
and much harm can be done by that. Much harm can be. Yeah. I mean, the latest thing now I've seen a trend recently is to attack the nature of the Eucharist by so-called scholars.
Well, I mean, what is it? The American magazine,
that was the most recent one. Yeah,
was it earlier this week? I think
it was very, very recently. Yeah.
But what did it say about the Eucharist? It is the body of Christ, not the body of Jesus.
Yeah.
And which of course everybody knows the Eucharist is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But what they were trying to, they were being Jesuitical and making what you referred to earlier, this trying to suggest that the Eucharist is the summit and summation of the Christian fellowship, rather than being, as it were, valid of itself, because of its nature. Bizarre stuff.
It reminds me of the great debate between Luther and Zwingli, where Zwingli was gone off the charts completely regarding the Eucharist, and Luther gets enraged and slams his desk, and he said, "It does not signify hoc est, hoc est, hoc est." There isn't much confusion. This is my body. Of course, things still continue to go off the rails after that. But I don't know. I mean, I see these sort of activities as a easily distracted child or a little kitten that plays with something until it's bored and then goes to play with something else. They're always looking for something. Nothing's good enough to be left alone. It has to be tweaked and played with, and a new turn, new spin. Look what I'm doing. Look at this interpretation that's coming from me by my book. Like Father said, that's just a waste of trees. In this era too, I think that's terrible. But as Father said, rather than navel gazing and tweaking things and trying to nuance things ad nauseum, there is an urgency. Our Lady has warned that we need to defeat apathy. We need to invigorate. We need to get back to fundamentals. That's what the time is calling for, not this messing around at every corner. Because time is real, time is urgent, souls are at risk at the end of the day. And that's the tragedy of it, when we talk about, and I think this is what Our Lady gets to in those messages, is that, even if God is still with the church and God is still in the church, there's so much confusion that souls are being lost. And one soul lost is a tragedy, a complete tragedy, an eternal tragedy. So therefore it is earnest. The stakes are high. And that's why we continue to do what we do. That's why we get animated. That's why we have a passion, not a revolutionary passion, but a passion for the truth, a crusade for the truth. If we can get more people together on that, I think we can turn the ship around, so to speak.
Yeah. Father Thomas?
Can you hear me now? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I think my my Bluetooth speaker just decided it had enough.
We thought as much. That was our diagnosis.
Yeah. Even technology can't stand me for too long. But I just to kind of pick up, and I think you concluded what I was trying to complete my thought. Thank you very much on that. Is that the church in herself is still together, but yet what happens when the shepherd is struck, the sheep scatter, and that's kind of where we're at. Is we have our own little camps. The sheep have bound. We're together in our own little camps, but we're still within the field. We're still we haven't left the field, but we're just further scattered from each other. And now the shepherd is trying to go out and reunite us. But yet you have one shepherd, you have the wolf still crawling around wearing shepherd's clothing. You have good shepherds trying to, collect the sheep together. And it's just such a discombobulation that we're in, that, the sheep have finally kind of gotten a sense and awareness that they can't just trust any old shepherd. And if they're not feeling comfortable with the shepherd, then they know something's going on. And it's very interesting. And as we've always said on the show, we are in interesting times. But yet, who was it the other day? I was listening to some Catholic commentator, and he said something to the effect of, whether or not we have a pope or whoever is the pope or what bishop or whatever does not have an effect on my Catholic faith. I can still be a Catholic. I can still have salvation of my soul. It does not depend upon all the political irregularities, the canonical situations, the erroneous teachings that are coming from whoever. That doesn't have an effect on my Catholic faith, as long as I know my Catholic faith. As long as I know the Catholic faith, as long as I've read, Baltimore Catechism, Penny Catechism, Council of Trent Catechism, I study sacred scripture, I look to the church doctors and the fathers to guide me, and I have good, faithful clergy and religious around me. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, because I think, as you pointed out, Bishop Kelly, when we get caught up into that mindset of, a shiny object, a distraction, we can get swept away with things. And then we can lose our faith. We can lose our soul. And, unfortunately, I have an inclination, and maybe this is just the Franciscan in me. I don't think our Lord, especially with all the possibilities of information we have, the internet, we can go out and you can get translations on text that centuries ago didn't have. We have the availability to have all we need for the salvation of our soul, to become informed Catholics. We have it easily available to us. There's no excuse. And I think our Lord is going to make that very clear to souls who are kind of going along to get along. They're going to have a rude awakening. Now, I'm not going to say they're going to be damned to hell, but you may be spending more time in purgatory than you thought. And that's the thing, and that's the crux of the matter for me. We have every possibility, from when we take our last breath and our last beating of the heart, we can die from this world and go straight to heaven. God has given us that ability. We don't need to spend any time in purgatory. God has given us every single grace from our baptism and solidified in confirmation, and through the strengthening and nourishing of the Holy Eucharist, and so on and so forth. We have every single grace at our disposal to go straight to heaven, to be with Him for all eternity at the moment of our death. But yet we don't do it because we're stupid, because we're, selfish, we're sinful, we're whatever. But yet God is so much with us and so loving us, never leaving us. He gives us every single opportunity possible to become saints right at the moment of our death. And it's up to us to choose it and to accept it and cooperate with it. And I'm terrible at it.
I'm, the first to say that what I've just said, you can accuse me of being a hypocrite, but I'm struggling. And as St. Paul said, working out my salvation in fear and trembling, because I realize God has given me every single grace possible. And I just have to accept it. I just have to cooperate with it. And it's difficult. It's hard. The world doesn't want you to have that because misery loves company. And, but yet that's the countercultural aspect of our faith. And that's the beauty of it. And I think for us, I would rather have a small, faithful community, and they know the Baltimore Catechism cover to cover, than have 500 faithful that can barely say the Our Father. I want quality, not quantity.
Well, now you see, that's interesting, because the thought that crossed my mind when you spoke about shepherds, and part of the problem, I think, at the moment in the church, and has been evidenced by all the Pew study papers, etc. I think a large part of the problem is aside from apathy, is ignorance. I think the vast majority of Catholics are ignorant of their faith, which is why they don't oppose the hierarchy. Why? Because they can't. Because they don't know any different. You've both made reference to the average parish situation. When I think of the average parish, straight away, my first appreciation is most of the Catholics there don't know what the Catholic faith is. They know that they're Catholic. They know that they should attend Mass on Sundays. And that's about it. They know about baptism, First Communion, perhaps confirmation, marriage, and funeral rites. But the rest of it, they're not interested in. And in part because they're ignorant of it. And that's evident, whenever you see, let's say, confirmations and holy orders celebrated. And in theory, there should be far more confirmands in the average parish than there are. When you think, there will be streams of First Communion children, but you'd be lucky to see streams of confirmation teenagers. And likewise, when a priest is ordained today, in theory, the whole church, the whole diocese should be present and come together for it. But they're lucky if they can fill a church. And I think a lot of that is down to ignorance. I meet so many people who, very proudly will say to me, "Oh, I'm Catholic." But if I ask them, where do you go to Mass? I probably 50-50 do go and don't go. And I know just from that one answer, there's no point then trying to discuss with them anything about what's going on with the state of the church. They won't be. They can't have the conversation.
It's quite interesting when
there's no vocabulary to dialogue. We don't have it. We don't have a shared bag of words. We just, because there's no foundation there whatsoever. It'd be like a nuclear scientist coming and talking to me in jargon. I wouldn't understand. I'm not equipped to engage in any serious conversation.
Yeah, the number of Catholics who have, asked me if I'm a Catholic wearing a cassock.
Oh, yeah, I get that all the time.
Said, well, I'm Catholic, and our priest, I've never seen him in a cassock.
I'm sometimes when I'm in I mean, they'll ask, "Are you a priest or are you a minister?" And I sometimes, if I'm either tired, grumpy, or a little mischievous, I said, "No, I'm a postman. Can I help you?" I mean, what do you think I am? Would you go up and ask a policeman if he's a policeman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had Catholics ask me if I'm a rabbi before now because of the Sukkot.
Oh, I've had that too. I know it's actually good. But I know Father Tom had started talking, but what strikes me too, you mentioned confirmation, and I think it's an important point, is that if there's a Catholic school in the parish, you'll get the lines for. It's just a given. There's no real opting out.
Not so much these
well,
days.
maybe it has changed, yeah. But in Catholic school, there really was no. Everyone just made their confirmation. People that attend Sunday school and have their children in state schools or other schools, then it goes way down the priority list. And I remember watching a documentary, and I think the same goes with the church back in the day too. But it was about the Hasidic community in New York. When they first came over, and of course they had the strange dress and their particular practices and all of that, and their rebbes. But the first thing that the leader of the community who first came, his priority was not synagogues; it was schools. Found schools. Make sure you teach the young people. Make sure they know the faith. Make sure they know the practices. Make sure they marry within the faith. Make sure they pass it along. And, to a certain degree, the church did that, certainly in the States with immigrants, the nuns, the schools, and everything was done within that. It was part and parcel of being part of a Catholic community. Now, people, like you said, are often at church. They know they have to go on a Sunday, but are they there? Are they there for the sermon? Are they there for the Eucharist? Or are they there because they're president of the Parish Golf Society, or all sorts of the social aspect of it? And in certain parishes,
they want the child to be eligible for the catchment for the Catholic school.
Yeah.
What
what's the Church of England thing? On your knees, lower the fees. People who show up to the Church of England just to get their kids into a Church of England school.
Yeah.
So if you sign up to the parish, your fees become less for the school. So on your knees, lower the fees. I think it's something like that. Yeah.
And that's why I always say the counter to all this has to be the personal holiness and witness of traditional Catholics. And we have to make a point of being traditional deliberately in front of our ignorant brothers and sisters. They have to see us make the signings of the cross. They have to see us pray the rosary. They have to see us wearing the veil. They have to see us wearing cassocks. They have to see us praying before Mass begins. They have to see us making acts of thanksgivings after Mass is ended, and to the extent that they should inquire, and see us kneel to receive the Eucharist on the tongue. See that we don't go to the chalice as well. We have basically got to re-evangelize the church herself. That's the task.
Mm-hmm.
That's the task. is to re-evangelize the church herself.
And to take a page out of my Seraphic Father's book. We don't need to necessarily be the smartest or most eloquent speaker. Just living in our daily actions is enough. Like we don't need to be the grand theologians and philosophers speaking from the pulpits and the universities. We just need to live our Catholic life, the authentic Catholic life, and just people will be attracted to it enough, and you can have a small conversation and grow from there. Planting seeds is really all we need to do right now, and probably further generations down the road, or other clergy and religious so on will till and collect the harvest. But I think we get too caught up in the overwhelming aspect of the church is in such a dire straits. How can one person make an impact to correct? And I think then that paralyzes us in a fear and an anxiety, and we get caught up in all the Catholic commentaries and the Twitters and all this other stuff of the echo chambers. But we're not doing anything. We're just spinning our tires in the mud or the snow or ice or whatever. Where all God is asking us to do is just be Catholic and live a simple life as Catholics. Like for me at work, I wear a polo now. I was able to acquire these polos online, and they have a Franciscan towel on it. And so I wear a polo with a Franciscan towel on it. Some people ask me, what does that T mean? And I'm like, if I know the person and I'm able to have a conversation with them about it, and they know that I'm a Franciscan, or they know I'm Catholic, they know I'm religious, then I'll have a conversation with them about it. Or, sometimes, I'll just say it stands for trust and hope and faith, or something, something easy, simple, but it gets a conversation. It plants little seeds. And I just get back to the basics. And I think if we had more Catholics getting back to the basics, a lot of these problems wouldn't be so problematic. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I thought your answer to what does the T mean would have been, I pity the fool who asked me what that T mean.
If I was feeling in a more, as you said, in a more one of those frisky or bad day moods, maybe. But no, for the most part, yeah. But it's just little things like that.
Mm-hmm. No, I quite agree. Even if they do ask you, are you a rabbi? It's an opportunity to explain why you're not.
Mm.
Yeah. And that question would never have come up, or that conversation would never happen had you not been wearing your yarmulke.
Yeah. But this is, this is the task really before us, is to consider that actually we need to re-evangelize the church. So as much as we need to evangelize the world, we actually need to evangelize other Catholics.
Well, it's quite interesting that the Franciscans are actually founded on that. That's one of our charisms.
If every religious order began as a reform,
rebuild my church.
Every religious order has had an internal reform. It's an ongoing process. As the Christian vocation and the Christian way of life is. It's a daily turning to God. It's a continual renewal of one's baptismal promises. It's a continual process of conversion. And this is as true of the individual. This is as true for the church as it is for the individual. And of course, this was the mistake lots of people thought about Vatican II. They thought that was a genuine, reform for the church. But of course, it wasn't, because the architects of it were not interested in reforming the church. That was the cover story. But what they wanted to do was to change the church. And that, of course, is what they're attempting to do now. But there is, very definitely a need for reform in the church, for a revival, but it has to come. It won't come from the top down, and that's why what Venerable Fulton Sheen said. It's you, the faithful, the lay people. It's not the bishops and the priests and the religious. It's the faithful who will reform the church and restore the church, because you are, as St. Peter says, the living stones.
I mean, you see that in the history of the Catholic Church in England. It was the people that kept the religion going. Yes, the priests come in and put their head on the line, quite literally, to supply mass, because that is their function and job. But it was the people who nurtured the religion, who provided for the priest to come, who hid the priest, who kept the vessels when the priest wasn't there, who taught it quietly through rhyme and code and song to their children. And then with the relaxation of the rules, then founded the parish. It wasn't the hierarchy that paid to decorate the churches in the wonderful architecture of the Gothic revival that spread throughout England, the likes of Pugin, etc. It was the people. It was often poor people. I remember there's a church in Cork in Ireland has a incredibly ornate plaster Italianate ceiling, and they brought craftsmen over for Italy, and this is in the 1800s, where the church was still under a lot of persecution in Ireland. But the people, the surrounding area, brought sections of that ceiling that was crafted by and baked it in their ovens, and brought it back to the church to be put there as decoration. So it is the people. It always comes from the people. The clergy and the clergy are there to provide the sacraments. The bishops are there to teach. Unfortunately, they seem lacking in that, some of them. To teach the faith and to lead. But primarily, the function of the church, the existence of the church, is with the laity. It's the domestic church which gives rise to the church universal. And it is the laity that will save it. It always has been.
And there's
otherwise you're just left with a bunch of, funny dressed zealots on whatever side they're on. I mean, but it's true. Either they're wearing wide lapels and flares or medieval garb. They're just there. The momentum has to be from the people. It is they who are the body of Christ, not to get back into America magazine, but in the fact that it exists, that they make up in the sense that St. Paul uses it. Fulton Sheen was right, is right, and we'll see. And I have great faith. History shows us that the people will not be cheated, and there will be an awakening. They'll be pushed so far that they will rediscover. And there's always an interest, and that ebbs and flows, and there's a rebirthing again. Well, I mean, I mentioned Gothic revivalism. Everyone thought the era of Gothic architecture was over. Then there was a re-emerging. So it's all the swing of the pendulum. I know it seems like the pendulum is stuck, but it will make a swing. And again, of course, the middle way is the way of the church. But like anything that's human, I mean, you think of the excesses of the 18th century. The the era of the powdered wigs and the foppish costumes and the makeup and the pointed shoes and the court at Versailles. And then you think of the sort of the austerity and rigidity of the Victorian age as a reaction to get against that. And this is constant. But, you know, I think extremes on either side are terribly wrong. Is what we should, is the via media, the middle way. It's the way of truth that we should keep our eye on. And then these fads and these fashions can come and go. That pendulum can go wherever it is if we walk the path of truth. So get out there. Walk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, understand, I think, that the church is under persecution both from within and without. From within and without. Clearly from without, in terms of, secular values, the increasing secularization of our society. And don't be ignorant of the powers and the forces that are at play here. I mean, for example, I was reading this week about the United Nations and the World Health Organization, who are pushing essentially, basically, we're pushing the sexualization of children through education, through sex education in schools. And I discovered a horrific video produced in line, in accord with the sex education curriculum proposed by the WHO and by the UN, where children, and I mean children, like 4 or 5-year-olds, were being asked if they played with themselves. It's shocking. I mean, I can't properly describe the content of that video, and yet this video is currently being used in schools across Europe. And here in the UK, the government again has refused or has stood by a court ruling that essentially forbids the sharing of third-party resources used in schools for sex education to parents. So in other words, a parent cannot, if a parent goes to a school and says, I'd like to know what you've been teaching Johnny in the classroom, the school can't show them the materials because of apparently copyright laws. And, do not underestimate the forces at play here, because they're very real. I mean, this is the thing, is that, when I read this full report on the UN and the WHO, at the beginning of it, I thought, this sounds, like one of them conspiracy theories, And then as I carried on reading, and as the evidence was produced of the syllabuses and the teaching materials, and this video, and so I was absolutely appalled. I was gobsmacked. And this is the thing, is these people have no shame at all. It's blatant.
No, and you see what's going on over here in the United States.
Showing all of this, because I mean we have the controversy that has been stirred with this new movie. Is it Sound of Freedom?
Yep, Sound of Freedom. Yeah, about child trafficking.
And I think, this really is serious. And, not that I'm a prophet, but I had foretold it, that they would, once gay marriage, it would be trans rights, and then it'll be the children.
Yeah.
And the destruction of innocence is particularly disgusting and nefarious. It is truly, truly, truly diabolical. And we should perhaps do a show on that. It'll be quite difficult and harrowing to talk about. But yeah, it's and the mainstreaming of this is just bone chilling.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, people don't.
But the thing is, but people aren't doing anything about it. Nobody's standing up against it. I mean, the majority of people don't want this. So the majority of people are ignorant about it. They don't know what's going on. And we need, you know, we do need a revolution in that sense. We need people to get off their keisters, get annoyed, and get sick to their stomach and fight. Like, what are we talking? You know, the holy war, right? A crusade. We need a crusade. Because if we don't start a crusade, if we don't band together on this, we're letting kids, innocent souls, be swept away to the devil. If we don't fight, no one will. If we don't band together and start this crusade, who's going to do it? And there's many organizations, there's many good Catholic groups out there, and I'm, you know, fortunate enough to know of a few of them. We do need to start getting together. We do need to start communicating with each other and see what we can do. Writing politicians, putting your money where your mouth is with the vote, standing up, going to a board meeting, saying, no, enough is enough. As a clergyman, we have the privilege to go to board meetings. Do we take the time to do it? You know, or do we tell the parents, you need to show up to these meetings and you need to voice your opinions? We can't just say, oh, someone else is going to do it. You know, one angry dad on YouTube that gets 100,000 likes or whatever, ranting and raving at one board meeting in a country. No, we need to have every board meeting. We need to have every school board be brought to this attention. It's not just enough for one or two or four. Every single one that's doing this needs to have, needs to be pushed back. Otherwise, we're allowing kids to have their innocence taken away from them. Yeah. And our Lord said, if you steal the innocence from these little ones, better a millstone be tied around your neck and you thrown into the deep.
Yeah.
So if we stand by and let it happen, you might as well just put a millstone around your neck now. And our Lord's not going to compromise. He's not going to give you, oh, well, I understand, you know. He's going to tell you, if you have the ability to do something, you sat by and did nothing, damn on you. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we've come to a time. Yeah, a little later than usual. Now, so remember, we're fortnightly now. So we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. I know I said it last time, and I meant it, and I do mean it. I am going to be discussing actually some of these subjects in videos that I want to share what I've been doing here locally and in the UK about these subjects, and to share some of the stuff that's going on. For example, a video of a surgeon who discusses the problems of transing puberty stopped children. So there's yeah, we need to we all of us need to address our ignorance around a lot of what is going on at the moment in the world. And of course, we will do what we can on this channel to bring it to folks' attention. But again, as you know, we've all said, you can't just watch it and do nothing. You have to do something. Something has to happen. And we all, the onus and the responsibility on it is on all of us. Whether we have children or not, whether we have families or not, whether we have anything to do with the local school or not, there's such a thing. Society means community, means everybody who's in it. As the saying goes, no man is an island. And I think we have to shake ourselves out of this really modernist approach of thinking, well, I'll just stay in my lane and ignore everything else, because that's a very selfish. It's antithetical to the gospel. That is modernism. Me, myself, and I. We actually, if we're going to be true Christians, we need to put ourselves out there, and that's not going to be comfortable. But then you will really see and understand how the church is being persecuted today. And at the end of the day, it's about the salvation of souls. It's about the salvation of souls, not just our own, but everybody else's. Everybody else's. And again, that's an attitude so missing in many Catholics today. This, not caring about the salvation of other souls. And yet, a fundamental of our faith as Catholics is to understand that nobody is in this world who God didn't intend to be here, and who God wants in heaven. And we all share in the responsibility of getting each other to heaven, including those who, say they don't want to go. Anyway, let's pray together. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
Pater noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra.
Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et mitti nobis debita nos, et nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo.
Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto.
Sic ut erat in principio nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum. Amen.
Sit nomen Domini benedictum. Ex hoc nunc
in
saeculum.
Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.
Qui fecit caelum et terra.
Benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et mane et semper. Amen. God bless you all, and thank you for watching. As we said, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. So look out for us then. Meanwhile, I shall, just watch out for the channel for programs that will appear there. And it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from them.
Bye now.